May I start?
No, just give us a second.
Νίκο, έχεις συνδέσει την κυρία Κριστίν Σαγιώ επίσης, που το ζήτησε?
You can start.
Okay, thank you. Before I start my lecture, I wish you all a blessed and happy new year. The theme of my lecture is the prospects of a union of the Orthodox Church with the Oriental churches and the Roman Catholic Church. Orthodoxy, having full awareness of its nature and its mission in the world, and faithfully following the example of the apostles and the fathers of the Church, has always been open to dialogue with the heterodox in order to guide them to know the truth of the Orthodox faith and to accept it by entering into the holy spiritual atmosphere of ecclesiastical communion. To this end, the Orthodox Church, consistent with its tradition, has already begun and conducts systematically since the middle of the 20th century bilateral and multilateral theological dialogues with the Christian churches and confessions, demonstrating its interest in restoring the unity of the divided Christian world. It should be noted that the undertaking of these ecumenical initiatives was not the expression of an individual interest or even of a small part of the Orthodox churches, but the fruit of a binding decision of the whole Orthodoxy, which was formally adopted at the Pan-Orthodox conferences, especially at the Third Pan-Orthodox Conference in Rhodos, 1964, and was repeated with particular emphasis at the Third Preconciliar Pan-Orthodox Conference in Geneva, and 1986, and at the Holy Great Synod in Crete in 2016. First of all, the bilateral dialogues which our church is conducting today are the theological dialogues with the Old Catholics, with the non-Chalcedonians, with the Oriental churches, with the Roman Catholics, with the Anglicans, with the Lutherans, and with the Reformed. The most important of these theological dialogues, which are of particular interest to the Orthodox, but also at the international forefront of contemporary theological and ecumenical discussion, are the bilateral theological dialogues with the non-Chalcedonian churches of the East and with the Roman Catholic Church, which I would like to draw your attention. At first, the Eastern Orthodox Oriental Orthodox dialogue. One of the most comforting and promising ecclesiastical developments in recent years was the success of the theological dialogue between the Orthodox Church and the non-Chalcedonian churches of the East, that is, the Coptic, Ethiopian, Jacobite, Syrian, Armenian, and Indian Church of Malabar, which altogether have around 60 million Christians adherents. After over 1,500 years of mutual suspicion and dogmatic confrontations since the Council of Chalcedon, 451, and despite the differences in Christological terminology and the diametrically opposing positions regarding the Chalcedonian definition, the two ecclesiastical families surprisingly came to an agreement to sign a common dogmatic document stating their shared dogmatic faith and teaching throughout the ages. It should be noted that although many gaps and difficulties remain to be sorted out in this theological dialogue before full communion can be reached between the two churches, the success even captured the attention of Western theologians, both Roman Catholic and Protestant, who were amazed at such an accomplishment. Which are the key milestones in this theological dialogue? The official dialogue was initiated by the Ecumenical Patriarchate at an ecclesiastical level in 1985 in Chambézy in Geneva, Switzerland, and lasted until 1993. This undertaking was preceded by 15 years of unofficial contact and theological talks between the Orthodox and non-Chalcedonians since 1964 and 1979, during which both groups became acquainted and realized the proximity between their theological traditions in relation to the Christological dogma. Significant stages in the official theological dialogue include the second general session of the ecclesiastical representatives of both traditions, which took place in June of 1989 at the Holy Monastery of Amba Bishoi in the desert of Nitria, and also the third general session, which was held in Chambézy in September of 1990. It was during these sessions that the common dogmatic statements, which clearly demonstrate total consensus on the essence of the Christological dogma, were signed. It is significant that the success of these above statements is not limited to Christology only, but extends to the whole faith of the one and undivided Church of the first 5 centuries, as well as all the dogmatic teachings of the four ecumenical councils following the schism of 451. In other words, the non-Chalcedonians now accept not only the first 3 ecumenical councils, which are common to both traditions, but the dogmatic teachings of the 4 councils that followed as well, although without recognizing them as ecumenical and equal with the first 3. The third general session mentioned above essentially fulfilled the purpose of the theological dialogue between the 2 committees as far as the Christological discussion was concerned. This being the main purpose of the dialogues. There remained, however, basic practical issues that would need to be resolved in order to achieve the full sacramental communion and unification between the Orthodox and the non-Chalcedonians. Such issues include the recognition on the part of the non-Chalcedonians of the last 4 ecumenical councils as holy and ecumenical, the theological question of whether or not the Orthodox tradition allows the reversal of anathemas which were issued against certain people and synods, and which ecclesiastical authority would have the power to do so, and also the measure to which pastoral economy could be implemented in matters of liturgical and ecclesiastical administration for the realization of sacramental communion and unification between the 2 ecclesiastical families. Once more, the Ecumenical Patriarchate took the initiative to address these issues. A plenary session of the Mixed Theological Committee of the Dialogue was convened in Chambézy in November of 1993 which, after meticulous considerations, drafted a mutually accepted test which included specific proposals to both groups for the lifting of the anathemas and the restoration of full communion between them. Although this document does clearly define the way in which the anathemas could be lifted, taking into account the resulting ecclesiastical consequences, and specifically addresses the pastoral and liturgical issues of sacramental unification, it fails to mention the validation of the last four ecumenical councils as a presupposition for the sought after sacramental communion. Having achieved the above-mentioned dogmatic agreements, the dialogue was then completely devolved from the theological committee to the level of the local churches of both sides. Besides, the signatures of ecclesiastical leaders who had taken part in the dialogue, the patriarchates of Constantinople, Alexandria, Antioch, and Romania on the side of the Orthodox, and by the Coptic, Jacobite, Syrian, and Syro-Malabar churches on the side of the non-Chalcedonians, upheld the dogmatic agreements with synodal decisions. The fact that the non-Chalcedonians approved the agreements has a special dogmatic significance, since with this action they recognized all the teachings of the seven ecumenical councils and the church fathers as completely orthodox. Let us see which are the problems facing the theological dialogue. Despite the astonishing success of this dialogue as far as the Christological aspects were concerned, which, as mentioned, drew the attention of Western theologians, Roman Catholic and Protestants, it must be acknowledged that many obstacles still remain to be overcome before a full sacramental communion can be achieved between the two church families. Although the non-Chalcedonians had recognized the orthodoxy of the teachings of all the ecumenical council and church fathers, as attested to by the signed declarations, they had still not recognized the last four councils as ecumenical and equal to the first three. This is the most fundamental problem that needs to be resolved before the goal of communion can be realized. In order to overcome these obstacles, two subcommittees have been created, one for pastoral issues and one for liturgical matters, which meet from time to time, seeking out mutually acceptable solutions to the issues that arose from the success of the aforementioned dogmatic agreement. Just a moment. Specifically, these problems exist because of a lack of awareness regarding the successful dogmatic agreement. There are also steps that still need to be taken to guide us smoothly and certainly to full communion and unification. Regarding the issue of awareness of the proceedings, it must be mentioned that the plenary session of the Mixed Theological Committee confronted this topic during the Fourth General Assembly in November 1993 and decided that it was necessary for the two vice presidents of the committee to take the following actions. On the one hand, they needed to visit the primates of both churches to fully inform them of the results of the dialogue, and on the other hand, to collaborate with the two secretaries of the assembly to see to the drawing up of suitable documents that could explain the content of the dogmatic agreement, both at a scientific level and in a context understandable to lay people, so that any potential misunderstandings could be avoided. However, while the joint vice presidents were very active in organizing the visits to the primates of both churches, very few steps were taken to create text explaining the outcome of the dialogue. The texts and publications that did circulate were the result of people who took a personal interest and not due to an organized joint effort on the part of the Orthodox and non-Chalcedonians. Besides this, these publications did not have the widespread impact that was needed to adequately and responsibly inform people regarding the outcome of the dialogue. Naturally, the lack of proper and systematic reporting on the results, at least in the Greek Orthodox milieu, led to misinformation. If one excludes paragraph 8 of the second joint declaration from 1990, which at least in my opinion needs, but I am not alone in this opinion, which paragraph needs clarification and better wording to avoid potential misinterpretations and to stop the doubts projected onto it by those who object. The fact remains that certain points of the dogmatic agreement that are indisputably orthodox and patristic in character were deliberately expressed in a vague manner with a clear dogmatic minimalism. This was allegedly done to facilitate a meretricious dogmatic agreement and an ecclesiastical union at the expense of the Orthodox faith. There were, of course, documented responses to these highly critical and largely unwarranted assessments. However, this created confusion in theological and ecclesiastical circles regarding the accomplishments and goals of the theological dialogue. In certain instances, there were attempts to revive the past, and the fathers of the church were being interpreted partially and at will in order to bring a halt to the continuation and success of this dialogue. Some considered any further continuation of the dialogue as a cause for a split in orthodoxy. Within the context of these objections, the harmful instances of orthodoxy digressing into fanaticism were unfortunately extremely disappointing. To avoid the reoccurrence of similar deplorable instances, not only is an efficient process of informing needed, but also productive inter-Orthodox deliberations and dialogue within the local churches, so as to create the greatest possible convergence and consensus between the ecclesiastical representatives in dialogue and the rest of the Orthodox flock. Without the greatest possible consensus, the sought-after sacramental union of the two ecclesiastical families poses a danger of creating internal splits among the local churches, which would be the worst possible outcome. Concerning the steps that still need to be taken to achieve sacramental unification between the two churches in dialogue, besides the resolution of the liturgical matters, which the appointed liturgical subcommittees have responsibility for, we have the opinion that the most fundamental obstacle that needs to be surpassed is the question of the non-Chalcedonians accepting the last four ecumenical councils, and especially the Council of Chalcedon, which was the impetus for the schism in the first place. As was previously highlighted, the non-Chalcedonians already fully accepted the dogmatic teaching of the last four ecumenical councils without the dogmatic agreement, with the dogmatic agreement included in the common declarations. However, the non-Chalcedonians have yet to recognize these councils as ecumenical and equal with the first three. This position of theirs, especially concerning the Council of Chalcedon, is due just as much to their traditional stance towards the definition of the Council and Pope Leo's tome, which the Council approved, then considered the definition of the tome to have Nestorian traits in the Christology due to the Diophysite wording, as it was to the condemnation by the Council of Dioscorus of Alexandria, whom they honor as a great father of their church. In this perspective, we see that we have two basic theological problems. First of all, the theological acception of the Council of Chalcedon, the definition of the Council of Chalcedon and the Council itself, and a second problem is the recognizing of Dioscorus of Alexandria as a saint of the church, while Dioscorus was condemned by the Council of Chalcedon as not as a heretic, but as canonically, as we see below, as for canonical reasons, I would say. But anyway, they accept Dioscorus and they honor Dioscorus as their great father of the church, of the non-Chalcedonians. Concerning the definition of Chalcedon, we must highlight the fact that modern academic research has proved very clearly that the theological nature of the definition not only is not Nestorian, but it also is Cyrillian. Indeed, the basis of the Diophysite formula of the definition of Chalcedon has been proven outright to be not Leo's tome, but the Christology of St. Cyril of Alexandria, something which is acknowledged even by eminent Roman Catholic theologians who, as one can see, would have every reason to support the opposite opinion. That the main source, the main source of the definition of Chalcedon is not Cyril of Alexandria, the Christology of Cyril of Alexandria, but the tome of Leo. But all recent Roman Catholic theologians accept that the Diophysite formula of Chalcedon and the definition itself as a main source the Christology of Cyril of Alexandria. It's undisputable. Consequently, it must be understood by the non-Chalcedonians that, based on modern theological scholarship, their reservation to accept the definition of Chalcedon is unjustifiable, as long as they claim to be faithful adherents to the Christology of St. Cyril. Also regarding Leo's tomb, we must underline the fact that the tomb was accepted by the Council of Chalcedon, which is already apparent from the minutes of the council, but only after they proved the orthodoxy and full agreement of the tomb with the epistles of St. Cyril, and especially with the third epistle to Nestorius, after the well-known intense challenges against its orthodoxy on the part of hierarchs from Eastern Illyricum and Palestine, and the explanations given by the papal legates to the council relating to the meaning of the Diophysite phrases in his tomb. As a result, in this case, the reservations of the non-Chalcedonians concerning the acceptance of the Leo's tomb are not justifiable with the commonly proposed argument that its acceptance by the Fourth Ecumenical Council allegedly entails violation of the Christology of St. Cyril. In other words, the definition of Chalcedon, just as much as Leo's tomb, were accepted by the Council under the condition of their full dogmatic accordance with the Christology of St. Cyril, which means that in that aspect, the theological character of the Council was absolutely in the line of with St. Cyril's Christology. The Christological wording of St. Cyril comprised for the Council the highest dogmatic criteria, both for the formulation and acceptance of the definition and for the acceptance and signing of the tome by the overwhelming majority of the fathers of the Council. No reservations about the Cyrillian character of the Council of Chalcedon can be established scientifically based on the facts of modern historical theological research. Finally, regarding the question of the condemnation of Dioscorus of Alexandria at the Fourth Ecumenical Council, it is also clear from the minutes of the Council that Dioscorus was condemned not for dogmatic, but for canonical reasons, which are nevertheless real and incontestable. As a result, the issue of his reinstatement, on which the non-Chalcedonians insisted, can only be resolved in the context of the pastoral dispensation of the Church, and as such, the responsibility for this issue lies completely in the jurisdiction of the Church itself. The only thing which we must note from a theological perspective is that the imposed ecclesiastical punishments are first and foremost of a pastoral character, with the aim of either correcting the faithful or their preservation from the danger of heresies, and as such, these punishments are valid in the history of the Church through the principle of economy, dispensation. Besides, in order for the Church to fulfill its ecumenical calling, it cannot be captive to historical occurrences and people when the truths of her faith are not affected by those historical occurrences. The examples of the great fathers of the Church who confronted issues of a similar nature show the way in which even this matter can be approached. So, based on these facts, the acceptance of the Council of Chalcedon, and by extension the next three ecumenical councils on the part of the non-Chalcedonians, should not constitute a problem. And we can come to the conclusion. Taking this brief overview of the theological dialogue between the Orthodox and non-Chalcedonians, we must emphasize, in conclusion, that despite the problems preserved by this theological dialogue, its prospects for the realization of sacramental unification of the dialoguing churches after the achievement of the dogmatic agreement are clearly favorable, provided that dialogue for the sake of dialogue is avoided, and of course also provided that they do not simply seek out a hastily and fragile unification which would lead to internal divisions and further problems than they are already seeking to resolve. To achieve this goal, both sides need to take sensible and methodic steps based on the luminous examples of the great fathers of the Church, who overlooked all that was secondary and trivial as long as they saw that the unity of the faith was intact. The fathers should not be perceived only as canons of faith and sure criteria of orthodoxy, but also as canons of pastoral prudence and ecclesiopolitical behavior in confronting similar problems of broken ecclesiastical unity. Only in this way can we properly understand the introductory phrase of the definition of Chalcedon. We then, I quote, we then, following the Holy Fathers, etc. And that it means, and what it means, what this expression means for us, that we follow the Holy Fathers. The Holy Fathers not only as canons of faith, but as canons also of pastoral prudence and ecclesiopolitical behavior. Let's say a few words for the theological dialogue with the Roman Catholic Church. The theological dialogue of the Orthodox Church with the Roman Catholic Church was essentially the fruit of the initiative of the Pan-Orthodox decision at the Second Pan-Orthodox Conference in Rhodos, 1963, according to which the Orthodox Church in the East proposes, I quote, that the Holy Roman Catholic Church might begin a dialogue between the two churches on equal terms, end of quotation. To this end, the Third Pan-Orthodox Conference of Rhodos, 1964, recommended to the various Orthodox churches to establish fraternal relations with the Roman Catholic Church, inaugurating in practice the so-called dialogue of love, in order to prepare the appropriate climate of mutual trust and understanding between the two churches for the beginning of the dialogue of truth, the theological dialogue, which constitutes the essence of the theological dialogue itself. Thus, after about 15 years of a dialogue of love between the two churches, the dialogue of truth officially began at the end of May and the beginning of June 1980 in Patmos and Rhodos, and continues with certain difficulties and fluctuations until our days. Up to date, the Joint Theological Commission on Dialogue has met 14 times, apart from Patmos and Rhodes, 1980, in Munich, 1982, in Chania, 1984, in Bari, in Italy, 1986 and 7, in Neuvalamo, in Finland, 1988, in Freising of Munich, 1990, in Balamand, Lebanon, in 1993, in Baltimore, in the United States, in 2000, in Belgrade, in 2006, in Ravenna, 2007, Cyprus, 2009, Vienna, 2010, Amman, Jordan, 2014, and lastly in Chieti, Italy, 2016, and was produced and approved 7 theological texts, the most important of which are those of Munich, Bari, New Valamo, and Ravenna. The themes of these the themes of these texts are related to the methodology adopted, according to which the dialogue should begin with issues that unite the two churches on the basis of the common theological tradition of the united and undivided church, in order to create a secure basis for effectively addressing the issues that divide them. Thus, the Munich text had its theme, the mystery of the church, the sacrament of the church, and the Eucharist in the light of the mystery of the sacrament of the Holy Trinity. The Bari text, faith, the theme of Bari text is faith, sacraments, and the unity of the church. The theme of the text of New Valamo, the sacrament of priesthood in the sacramental structure of the church, and in particular the importance of the apostolic succession for the sanctification and unity of the people of God. And the theme of the text of Ravenna, ecclesiastical and canonical consequences on the sacramental nature of the church, ecclesiastical communion, synodality, and authority. These are the themes of the 4 texts of the theological dialogue of the Orthodox Church with the Roman Catholic Church. Evaluating the results of the theological dialogue so far on the basis of the above texts from an Orthodox point of view, I would like to point out that there are points in these texts that are closer to the Orthodox than to the Roman Catholic theology. It is true, it's not an expression of wording, I would like to say. From this point of view, we can say that the prospects of the dialogue between the Orthodox and the Roman Catholic Church are positive, as long as the dialogue remains with the theological framework of the ancient and undivided church that was established by the texts of Munich, Bari, New Valamo, and Ravenna. But we have nowadays the most difficult problem to face in our theological dialogue with Roman Catholics, which are which is the role of the Pope in the Church. And the text of Chieti is not enough to give a clear response to this theological problem. This is what I would like to say about these theological dialogues. And now I am ready to hear your answer. Okay. Nikos, I finished.
Okay.
Yes, we're waiting
can
for
you listen to me?
Father Agustinus to moderate. Yeah, okay, yeah. Yes, we can listen to you guys.
Okay. I will ask for your forgiveness. I was asked to moderate just a few moments ago. So, firstly, we would like to thank Professor Emeritus Professor Georgios Marcellos, whom it happened actually to be the professor when I was much younger, the one who taught me, in a sense, in this difficult path of doctrines and of systematic theology. So I do owe him a lot personally. So it was, I quoted here in my notebook a lot of things that I would love to ask you, Professor Marcellos, but Nikos, I can't see him. Is he still with us? I can't see his camera on his video. So let's continue hoping that he's still with us. Adalberto, can you see that he's still with us? No, I think probably he has some internet problems with his connection, I mean. So there are a few things that I would love to point out, to highlight, and to pose at the same time some questions. And allow me, since Adalberto is here with us, and also would like to welcome Professor Dimitrios Moschos and Petros Vassiliadis. Adalberto, waiting also for Professor Marcellus to return. I would like to have your opinion too. Do you think that the official theological dialogue between the Orthodox and the Catholics can bring some fruitful results in relation to unity in practical terms? I mean that there are a lot of theological voices proposing that the churches should proceed with the sharing of Eucharist, even if there are still some dividing issues between the two parties. But let me also say this: we, as an Orthodox family, let's say, don't we have problems to each other? Huh? The problems are numerous. We have many problems, at least in the local level, between Orthodox churches. But still, we share. We still share the same cup and the same bread and the same wine. So I think personally that our churches. Here you are, Professor Marcellos. You were able to follow us because we lost you for a few moments. So I was asking you, Professor Marcellos, if you think that the Orthodox and the Catholic Church should move beyond the official, let's say, protocol, acting in Christ and following the example of Jesus that he was doing during his public ministry. Do you think that if it's the moment, or if it's not the moment, to proceed with the sharing of the same blood and Jesus, I mean Jesus' blood and Jesus' bread, and the same Eucharist? Or still, if you think that these existing dividing issues are so much thorny that still provide too many obstacles in order to be in the same line. So there are also, and with this I would like to stop, giving you the word to answer. Do you think that this separation between the Orthodox and the Oriental, between the Eastern and the Oriental Christians, will cease to be when when we stop looking so much at terminology and look at the life itself of the churches. So, do you think that we should evolve a new terminology in regards to Christology, seeing that in ecclesiology we too share a lot of things? We have many elements that we share. So that at least for the beginning. So the floor is yours.
Thank you for your questions. I'll begin with the last one. I think that there is no need for a new terminology because we have resolved the problem of our Christology. They have accepted on their own side that we are not Nestorians, and we have accepted on our own side that they are not Monophysites. They are not Eutychians, I mean. They express their Christological teaching, their Christological faith in the terminology of St. Cyril of Alexandria. In this perspective, it's no need for a new terminology. At the moment that we have found an agreement on the theological, on our theological faith, on our Christological faith. It's clear. So far as the first question concerns, I would say that according to the theology of the Orthodox Church, and also according to the theology of the non-Chalcedonian churches and the Roman Catholic Church, the unity in faith proceeds compared with the unity of sacraments, in sacraments. And we have expressed this theological position in the text of Bari with the Roman Catholic Church. The Roman Catholic Church has, this is why we have, do we have such an agreement with the Roman Catholic Church? Because this is the faith and the opinion of the Church Fathers of the United Church of the first millennium, that the unity in faith, it's the presupposition for the unity in the sacraments. In this way, we cannot make an expense on this theological position. You see? But we have to describe, first of all, what are the main points of the dogmatic faith of the two churches, which express the faith, the essence of the faith of each church. For example, the acceptance.
Yes.
Excuse me. For example, the acceptance of the fourth ecumenic, of the last four ecumenical councils. It's a thing of the essence of the faith of the church. It's an ecclesiological issue we cannot make an expense on this. We have the example of Saint Athanasius the Great, who, in his dialogue with the Homoousians, who did not accept the Council of Nicaea, Athanasius made a proposal to them that they can they can be united with the Orthodox Church under the presupposition that they accept the Council of Nicaea, but to accept, of course, the difference of the terms ousia and hypostasis. But you see, the presupposition is to accept the Council of Nicaea. This is an example in order to have a help to resolve this problem of the non-acceptance of the last four ecumenical councils from the side of the non-Chalcedonians.
Yes, exactly what you said before, because as you said, Professor Marzellos, during the first two ecumenical synods, we have mainly the main formulation of our faith, where we can find the historical roots of both sides, Eastern and Oriental, right? So the acceptance by the two sides, the first two ecumenical councils, it's something very important because we have the formulation of the Nicene Constantinople Creed. So we can find here our common, let's say, ecclesiological and Christological common space, right? So the problems is, as you said rightly, many times arise during the 5th century. So allow me, Professor, to give the word to Adalberto. Adalberto, can you listen to us? Would you like to share with us your comments, questions? Thank you.
Yes, I would like to thank Professor Marzellos for his presentation of two very important dialogues with non-Chalcedonian and with Roman Catholic Church. These are bilateral dialogues, but very important also for the whole ecumenical movement. I will make some remarks on what you said, Professor Marzello, because it seems me very important. On the first part, the dialogue with non-Chalcedonian, I have three remarks. As you have pointed out, the scholarly research, for instance, the dependence of the theology of Chalcedon, not only on the Tomos Leonis, but on the theology of Cyril of Alexandria, is an important point that can that had helped the dialogue with non-Chalcedonian. And this is a methodological point. We have to do scholarly research, historical and theological, because we have to start our dialogue not only not on an ideological ground, but on a solid ground of knowledge. We have to know better our own tradition, and that's why I think this point is very important. Also, the problem on terminology. What did they mean with one nature? What did they understand with these Greek words? Were there a cultural misunderstanding. This can be overcome only with serious theological research. This is the first point. The second point is methodology. So we have
one by one.
Okay.
Excuse me. Let me give an answer to this remark, and then you can pose me the second one. Yes. Perhaps you know that there are many recent Roman Catholic theologians that accept that the main source of the definition of faith of Chalcedon is not Thomas Leonis, but Cyril of Alexandria. For example, André de Aleu and Tomislaus Hadžibunić are the two great names of Roman Catholic theologians who have represented this opinion very strongly. When we compare this opinion with the opinion, for example, of Ignazio Ortiz de Urbina, who had written a paper in the volume of Grillmeyer, the Council of Chalcedon, in the first volume. Ignazio Ortiz de Urbina represents the opinion that the definition of Chalcedon is a mosaic of theological opinions from East and West. And this opinion has been rejected by André de Aleu and Tomislaus Hadžibunić, who with great, I mean the Roman Catholic theologians, who with great clarity, I would say, and they have persuaded us that the main source of the Chalcedonian faith, the definition of Chalcedon, is the Christology of Saint Cyril, and mainly his letter, the second letter and the third letter to Nestorius, and the letter to John of Antioch. I have made an effort in my book under the title Genesis and Sources of the Definition of Faith of Chalcedon to prove that Cyril of Alexandria the first Cyril and the second Cyril, I could say. The first Cyril is the Cyril before the union of 433 with the Antiochs, and the second Cyril is the Cyril after the union of 433, namely these aspects of Cyril's Christology, of the first Cyril and the second Cyril, are the basis and the sources of the definition of faith of Chalcedon. Philologically and theologically, I tried to prove that Saint Cyril is the main source of the definition of faith in Chalcedon. Why? Because Cyril was the main father of the church in the Council of Chalcedon, which has an undisputable authority among all the fathers of the synod. You must take into account that when the Egyptians and the Palestinians disputed the tomb of Leo, the bishops the bishops of the area of Constantinople and the Antiochs, among them also Theodoret of Cyrus, recalled parallel citations from Cyril in order to prove the orthodoxy of Thomas Leonis. In this perspective, Cyril was an undisputable authority in the Synod of Chalcedon, because the Thomas Leonis was criticized and found orthodox under the Christological light of Saint Cyril. Yes.
Yes, thank you. I've just said this, that when we better know the history and the sources, we come closer. So it is easier for non-Chalcedonians to understand in a different way Chalcedon when they have this proof you have just mentioned.
Mm-hmm.
That's why I say this methodology to know
Yes.
better the fathers and what is behind the definitions, and not just to have a definition as a sort of flag against the other. And I think this, the second point of methodology,
Yes,
is important to see how also the dialogue between two great Chalcedonian families, Roman Catholic and Orthodox, can work together, because also Roman Catholic has parallel dialogue with non-Chalcedonian, which has benefited from the bilateral dialogue between Orthodox and non-Chalcedonian.
yes.
And the last point you have mentioned already is the weight of the past, the problem of anathemas, and how can we look our own past. And I think this, we had an example in the last century, when at the end of the Second Council in Vatican, the two families, you mentioned the dialogue of love, came closer, and the Church of Rome and the Church of Constantinople could cancel the reciprocal anathemas. It was not a healing of the schism, but the two churches of Rome and Constantinople could cancel their reciprocal anathemas, which were on single person and not all the church. And this, I think, is a possibility, that the past can be read through other lens when you come to a common understanding.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. You're right. Besides, we have examples from the history of the church. I mean, the ancient history of the church. For example, the Church of Constantinople and the Church of Alexandria had not church relations between them. In factum, there was a schism because of the condemnation of Saint John of Chrysostom. And Saint John Chrysostom was condemned also for canonical, but also for dogmatic reasons from the side of the Alexandrians. And after the death of Saint Chrysostom, the church leaders of Constantinople and Alexandria reaffirmed their relations and the unification of the two great churches of the East. Of course, Nestorius was another problem as a patriarch of Constantinople, and but you see, Nestorius was condemned not only in the Third Ecumenical Council, but also in the Fourth Ecumenical Council, and he was accepted as heretic from the Constantinopolitans, of course. We have such examples from the history of the church, which show us that when the reasons of the condemnation are canonical and not dogmatical, we can reestablish the union between the church, the church families.
Okay, thank you very much, Adalberto, for your remarks, and Professor Marcellus for your answers. Just in terms of clarification, I would like something to say that I asked you before about the communion in sacraments before the final doctrinal agreement, so not to be misunderstood. But I have in my mind, I'm aware and I know about the letters, official letters addressed from the Ecumenical Patriarch Athenagoras to Pope from Paul, asking him to concelebrate the Eucharist, of course, along with the other patriarchs of the Eastern Orthodox churches. So, but unfortunately, death was faster than this plan. But so I was also having in my mind, and I would like to ask you, Professor, what about the cultural, politics, and even national reasons behind that schism occurred between the Eastern and the Oriental Christians? Do you think that apart from the doctrinal reasons, we have other reasons which influenced negatively their ecclesial relations in so much high degree that actually led the two churches into this schism? And I'm very in favor of Adalberto's opinions about that we should reread the historical documents in order to be able, nowadays, to identify the real reasons behind of that schism. And something last is that I'm afraid, and I would say I'm quite convinced that the culture itself played a great and important role of not only in this schism, but also regarding the schism between the Catholics and the Orthodox, because faith in one or another way takes, or at least is, let's say, it is incarnated faith using cultural, let's say, things, words, images, music, architectural, and sometimes life itself divides us. So we have to be strong enough in order to remain together. So remaining together, it's probably much more difficult than to live apart. So we have to redefine our daily life and our faith I presume. So I would like to also we have in our company together Professor Dimitrios Moschos. So also he would like also to address to you, Professor Marcellos, some questions. Professor Moschos, can you?
Thank you. Yes, I can hear you. Unfortunately, I think
We want
my
to see your
camera
face.
does not work. I don't know why. So it's well, you see something a blank space here, but well, I'm still here anyway. Thank you for the
It's nice
thank you for the interesting discussion, and of course, thank you, Professor Marcellos, for his very insightful lecture on this on the aspect of these dialogues. I must say I'm watching very carefully, so for a long time, the reactions of the critical position of the mainly from Mount Athos and the Grigoriou monastery in numerous publications against the very important text of the joint text of the joint commissions of 1990s. And well, I see there are two main aspects here that have to be discussed. One is the extent of the authority of the patristic thinking, to which we are obliged to follow, as you said, to follow the fathers, the faith of the fathers. These critics, these always point that, well, it can be comprised to one sentence. We are not wiser, we are not saintlier than a whole series of bishops and fathers for so long time that did not actually healed this schism, and they insisted on the Christological differences. So on what authority can we now question, so to say, the authority of the fourth and the subsequent councils and the anathemas and all these long church life and reopen, so to say, and prove them to be well, actually to be all that a misunderstanding. So everybody was, could not understand, but we are smarter and we saw that. So this is the main traditionalistic argument that they always put on, and I think that should be in a way addressed in order to proliferate, to transmit for the broad public opinion of the church what has actually happened in the 90s. I think this is very important. And the second one is a question of a detailed or decimating methodology to cut off in slices every small position of the text agreed of the agreement, and to interpret them in every possible direction in order to show that somehow in a logical turn after many discussions, the X word combined with the Y word can actually lead us to Eutychianism and so on and so on. This method is usually applied to the writings of Severus of Antioch, whom you did not mention, but he always tried to identify him as an coveted monophysite and Eutychianist, and say, well, we should not be deceived by his writings and so on. Although there are, of course, many interesting dissertations and monographs about Severus' thinking, but they still insist that all this is a theater. This is something to blind us, not to see that they are actually in the depth. They are still these demonized monophysites whom we know. So we have to address these two problems, I think, because every now and then they collect a sermon or an article of Bishop of Damietta, for example, of someone else, and say, you see, if we follow this argument here and we combine it with that, and then with that, and then with that, something else, in the end we have still a monophysite way of thinking. So we have to crush this and to explain that these joint statements, they have a theological minimalism, which is on purpose. Like, of course, also the Nicene Creed did that. We cannot always, all the time, discuss about everything, every possible theological detail, because this is not possible. We have also Orthodox Church fathers, like Gregor of Nyssa, for example, and others, or writers like Dionysius Areopagita, who have phrases, sentences in their or opinions in their works that are not Orthodox, actually, but we still consider them very important. These works very important for the Orthodox theology. So we have to reach a point and say that, well, if Severus says something, or someone writes an opinion, or has some, there is a certain discrepancy about the synthetos hypostasis, or something like, synthetos hypostasis and all these things, we have to stick to the basic idea that the Oriental Orthodox churches signed a text where is spoken about asynchitos and adieretos, which is actually, and atreptos και achoristos, which is actually the main core of the councils, of the synods, of the decisions of Chalcedon. So everything else is actually secondary, I think. Well,
yes, I could say that the joint agreements we have reached so far as the dialogue with the non-Chalcedonian is concerned, are not with theological minimalism. No, I could not accept this. So far as the Christological question is concerned, the joint agreements have, I could say, a theological maximalism. We have answered in these joint agreements, these declarations, in all the issues coming from the Christological disagreement. I think the 4 Christological disagreement. And after we have found that we can agree that Christ is a person, and the person of Christ is God Logos,
yes,
and in his person has united the human nature, and the human nature is consubstantial with our nature, there is no problem in Christology. So far as your first question is concerned, you posed the questions. The question we hear many times from the monks of Holy Mountain. for example, are we more clever than the fathers of the church? And we are in the position to find solutions in order to reunite our two churches. In the fact, we follow the example of St. John Damascene. If we read the works of St. John Damascene, we can find that St. John calls the non-Chalcedonians heretics and Orthodox.
Yes.
Read, for example, the quotation referring to the non-Chalcedonians in his work Peri Hereseon.
Heresibus, yes.
Yes, the Heresibus. In this quotation, St. John Damascene characterizes the non-Chalcedonians as heretics, and that's why he involves them in his work Peri Hereseon as heretics, but at the same time, he calls them Orthodox.
Yes, he said that in every other respect, κάτι άλλα
in every
ορθόδοξη
other.
υπάρχουν. Yes.
Yes.
Εν προφάσει του εν Χαλκιδόνη συντάγματος.
Έτσι.
Yes.
What happens here? In my opinion, I have written many articles referring to this theme as an answer to the publications of the Holy Monastery of Grigoriou, but also in other articles. I've stressed that the non-Chalcedonians, according to John Damascene, are heretics because they do not accept the Fourth Ecumenical Council. The criterion of one to characterize him as heretic is not the analyzing of his Christology, of his teaching. The criterion for the fathers of the church is does one accept the ecumenical councils of the church or not? If they do not accept even one council, one ecumenical council, as the fourth one, is heretic. But Damascene, in his work De Duabus Voluntaribus, says that the non-Chalcedonians accept that, St. John Damascene says that the non-Chalcedonians accept that the human nature of Christ is consubstantial with us. The human nature of Christ is the second one, which is born from the Virgin Mary. In this way, they accept the double generation of Christ, the double natures, the double consubstantiality, and he says at last, and you accept, you, the non-Chalcedonians, you accept that Christ is of two natures, out of two natures, εκ δύο φύσεων. In this sense, why do you not accept the Chalcedonian definition? The same theological teaching expresses the definition of Chalcedon, says John of Damascene. John Damascene. in this way, we have the expression of a father of the church who recognizes that the non-Chalcedonians accept the essence of the Christological teaching of the church, but they do not accept the Fourth Ecumenical Council. And that's why he characterizes them as heretics.
Just if I can make a comment on that, yes.
Yeah, I think
yes, Professor,
that,
continue.
I think that this is a good example to understand that the fathers of the church do not interest in the ideological orthodoxy of anyone, because orthodoxy is not an ideology according to them. The orthodoxy for the fathers of the church is a communion with the church. Communion with the church. St. John Damascene, referring to the heresies of autoproskoptes, characterizes them as at all things orthodox, But, he says, they cut themselves from the communion of the church. And that's why they characterizes them as heretics. It's a good example to understand which is the dogmatic criterion for the church fathers, not the ideological orthodoxy, but the existential, I would say, orthodoxy, which is a communion with the church.
Thank you very much.
If I could make a comment, I'm not sure how easy is for our Oriental's Christian brothers to accept the sixth ecumenical council. I think it's even more difficult for them to accept the sixth than the fourth ecumenical council. And the main recommendation coming from the Oriental side is that they, after the fifth ecumenical council, they didn't participate in any at the rest of these
you mean the fifth
councils.
ecumenical council, not the sixth. You mean the fifth ecumenical council, not the sixth?
Yes, the fifth.
The fifth.
So yes, the fifth. So it's where it's we have the contamination of Dioscorus and Severus, the first one who is named as hated of God, and the second one is mad and wicked. So it's quite difficult for our brothers, Oriental brothers, to accept the rest of the ecumenical council, since they didn't participate, and in a large degree, this is my perspective, this is my understanding, I could follow them. It's like if we could use the same example, let's take it in another level, comparing to the dialogue with the Catholics and the Orthodox and the Catholics. If the Orthodox side would be asked from by the Catholic Church to accept the results of their general councils that they had after the schism, we would be able to accept these the results and the decisions of these general councils that took place within the Catholic Church. I suppose that we wouldn't be able to accept them, since firstly we didn't participate, and secondly because of the schism, because of the breaking of our communion in sacris. So we for one or another reason, we decided to split. So from this perspective, I'm trying to present also some kind of the argumentation of the other side, which Unfortunately, they're not taking part in this today's lecture of coming from Professor Marcellus. So, and also there's another argument coming from their side that they denounce the teaching of Pope Leo. They do not accept these the two wheels theology, two wheels of Christ, right? So the main basic theological argumentation coming from the incarnated Lord and the incarnated Logos. I would like to have also a comment. I'm not sure. I would love to have also Nikos comment. What time do we have to coming, I think, to the closing of our lecture? But I would love to have a comment from your side, Professor Marcellus, regarding my last comment, and also the previous one. If do you think if that the cultural reasons behind this schism played a major role in this separation between the two sides? Thank you very much.
Of course, they have played a great role to the schism, but we have to take into account that at the end of the first millennium and at the beginning of the second millennium, when the church was united, there were cultural differences between the two churches, and these cultural differences have not played a great role to the division of the church itself. When the division of the church came into the surface of the theological problematics, when the Eastern Church was informed that an addition of filioque in the symbol of faith was added, and that was not decided from the old patriarchs, from the pentarchy of the church, but only from the one bishop of the church, which was who was the Bishop of Rome. You see the difference. We had the seventh canon of the Third Ecumenical Council, which was against any addition or delete of a phrase from the symbol of faith. The church continued to have a sacramental union and sacramental relations, the East and the West. Although they had a variety of cultural interests and facts. But the addition to the symbol of faith was the beginning of the schism. Not the teaching of filioque. The church lived with the teaching of filioque more centuries than without the teaching of filioque. 6 centuries lived the church with the teaching of filioque, without division. What has divided the church? The addition to the symbol. We must take it into consideration. And Father Augustinos, as far as the general synods of the Roman Catholic Church are concerned, I think that we should not identify the ecumenical councils with the general synods of the Catholic Church. You see, the characterization of these synods as general comes not from us, but from the Western theologians, from the Roman Catholic theologians. They characterize them as general in order to distinguish them from the ecumenical ones. The ecumenical ones are express the faith of the church. The general synods are local synods and express a solution to the problem they faced in their own area. But we should not identify the general synods with the ecumenical ones. I think that Professor Larenzakis wrote a work about this distinction from the side of the Roman Catholic Church. It's very interesting.
Thank you very much. I think coming to the end, I would like to give only for a few minutes, and Alberto, the word is to you. And also I would like you to end this afternoon's lecture. Professor Margelos, thank you very much. Professor Moschos and Vassiliadis, thank you very much, all of your participants. So Adalberto, please, the floor is yours. And thank you indeed again.
All the participants to this very interesting conversation. And in fact, the point of the difference between the last point, general and ecumenical councils, is important. Yes, is a distinction in the Western theology, is disputed. And the wrong point would be if the Roman Catholic Church would ask to recognize all the general council as ecumenical to the other churches, which was in the past. In many regards, all these, and still regards, all these council of the Western Church as ecumenical. But what have said Cardinal Ratzinger and Pope Benedict XVI, that the Church of Rome should never ask nothing more for the unity than what was recognized and believed together in the first millennium, that is in the seventh council.
Yes, yes.
This is the basis for a common faith. I think on these bases we can build further towards the unity. And also in some regards, when the dialogue with the non-Chalcedonians is concerned, they recognize the contents, the dogmatic contents of the Chalcedonian Council. And let us think of reception in the future, in the becoming of this council as ecumenical, if it bears fruits of unity. As a vision for the future. I would thank all of you for what I have learned in this conversation and the opportunity of sharing with you.
Thank you.
Thank you all.
Thank you.
Thank you very much, all.
Bye.
So.